Firstly, tonight, I would like to welcome Danielle to do our acknowledgement of country. Danielle, thanks.
Sure, yeah. So we've got people joining from all over the country and possibly all over the world today. So I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners from around Australia and to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I extend this acknowledgement to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who may be joining us today.
Thank you, Danielle. Well, now it's time for me to introduce you. So Danielle is normally one of the co-hosts of the session, which of course she still is this evening, but she has kindly agreed to present for us today on building the financial modelling dashboard. So Danielle is a author, trainer, consultant, all things financial modelling basically. She has a massive LinkedIn group related to financial modelling, and she always gives me the update of how many people have joined that group every time we do one of our sessions.
I think it's nearly 60,000.
Wow. So it's a crazy number and indicates how many people are actually interested in financial modeling. And I know I personally had no idea that there was any such interest until one time I did one of Danielle's courses, and then I saw, I heard about the group and realized that there were all these other people around Australia and around the world that are interested. So if you want tips and, information from all sorts of different experts and interested people, that's a great resource. So yeah, Danielle is also a Microsoft MVP, which is very exciting. And tonight, and her latest, can you tell me the latest edition of your book, Danielle? The third edition of Using Excel for Business and Financial Modelling. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the third edition. But the latest is actually the financial modeling for dummies. That's just came out earlier. The second edition came out
Second
earlier.
edition, my apologies. Yes, that's from this year. Okay, wonderful. So I think you'll all agree that Danielle is very much the expert in the world of financial modelling, and this is a really interesting presentation. So the way that we're going to run it tonight is it's going to be quite interactive. So Danielle and I will probably have a discussion about some things, and if you have anything to contribute, please feel free to put it either as a question, or perhaps if it's sort of something back and forth that's happening, it could just go through, have that discussion through the chat, whatever works best, I guess, for you. So thank you very much, Danielle, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jessica. I'm just going to share my screen, so you should be able to see my PowerPoint now. Is that right? And if we are, yeah, hopefully I'll be able to see the chat. So do feel free to interrupt me if there's any questions or comments as we go. I keep this fairly sort of casual, so do feel free to jump in with any questions or comments. So we're scheduled to go for about an hour, and I'll try to leave enough time for questions as well. So as Jessica said, financial modeling is my world, and this is one of my favorite topics, is to talk about the presentation of the financial model using a dashboard. So when she asked what I wanted to talk about, I was like, yes, this is the one, because you guys are interested in financial modeling, or you're already building financial models. So I didn't want to just talk about financial models, but this kind of takes it a little bit further. So just a little bit of background on me. So yeah, so I just kind of live in the whole kind of financial modeling space, like anything to do with financial modeling I get really excited about. And I used to travel a lot to run training. So I do consulting and training because I think it's really important to actually work building financial models rather than just talking about it, of course. But I used to travel a lot, and I'm really excited about my first. I was just applying for my visa today to go to Saudi Arabia, which is my very first overseas training course. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to being able to do face-to-face again, because yeah, remote is quite convenient, but there's nothing quite like face-to-face. So this is what I'm going to talk about today. Hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to have you with us. We will be covering tips and tricks of how to build a dashboard for a financial model. Please ask questions in the chat. And my goal today is to take you through this course. Have I lost you yet? Jessica, am I completely, you're like regretting having asked me to do this, right?
I was just drifting off, turning on mute.
Yes,
Sorry,
yes,
jeez.
just nodding off already. It's an awful, awful way to start a presentation. To especially when you've presenting the output of your financial model, which of course should be absolutely riveting. Everybody should be absolutely on the edge of their seat, wanting to know what the results are for your financial model. And if you start to bore them all by reading off slides or telling them what you're going to tell them, and then talking about my goal is to take you through. They don't care. Your listeners or the people that you're presenting to don't care about what your goal is. You really need to think about what it is that they want to get out of the presentation today. So that is not what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be talking about the numbers, because if you are working as accountants, and as I presume you're building financial models, the definition of a financial model, of course, being inputs and outputs, a structure that's dynamic, and the numbers are often changing a lot. So you might have scenarios, or you might have a P&L, cash flow, balance sheet, but people do not get very excited by numbers. I know we love numbers. We love to see numbers, and working on cells and columns and rows. What gets us excited, but not everybody loves numbers as much as we do. And even if you were to put a little bit of color around it, if you might put some conditional formatting over it, of course that can be a little bit more interesting, but still it's just numbers, and people do not get excited about numbers. And this is something that I learnt fairly on when I first started building financial models, is that people don't want to see numbers, even if you put colors on it. So what is important is to make the numbers speak for you, to actually bring meaning out, to take the financial model and actually give it meaning. And so this is what I'm going to talk to you about today. So we'll talk about why dashboards are so important in finance, and particularly in financial modeling. I then want to actually show you some of the tools. So I've actually got a case study that I want to show you, which was an existing financial model, and then I just put a dashboard, and I just want to show you how we put a dashboard over the top in Excel. I might even show you a little bit of Power BI if we've got time, because that Power BI, of course, is a dashboarding tool. Not so much for modeling, but it's something you definitely should know if you're building dashboards. And then lastly, we'll go through some of the principles of dashboard design. So we'll kind of do a bit of practical hands-on demo, as well as some kind of conceptual stuff. So we'll talk about, first of all, why they're so important in finance, because we live in the age of big data, and there is millions and millions of pieces of information flying around everywhere, and they don't actually make sense unless we put context around them. We actually arrange them into a shape that is meaningful for people, because data is not information, information's not knowledge, knowledge is not understanding, and understanding is not wisdom. So our job as modelers, accountants, analysts, is to take that data and to present it into something meaningful. So people care about your financial model, but what they really care about is, what is the financial model telling us? And the most efficient way of presenting that information is in the form of a dashboard, because when you present the output of your financial model, you are competing against a lot of things. When I first started out, I would send my report in black and white with grid lines, which was very boring, and I could probably guarantee that people were sitting at their desks and looking at the report or the output of the financial model, and that's not the case now. So we really need for our dashboards to grab attention quickly and easily, and a dashboard is a great way of doing that. Of course, we have that sort of analogy of a dashboard of a car, but it's a bit more than that. I mean, this is Stephen Few is probably quite well known as the father of the modern dashboard. And this is an example of the kind of thing that you can build with a dashboard. So it really needs to be show the most important information on a single screen that you can see at a glance. And that's the idea, of course, if you're tearing along the Bruce Highway and you just, you don't have time to be fiddling about with dollar signs. You need to be able to see what's coming up front and maybe look in the rear. You want to be able to see at a glance, your speed, your fuel, the key indicators. And that's really what a dashboard should be. You should look at cash flow, head count, KPIs, those sorts of important things. People often try to make it look a bit cute, like the dashboard of a car, and they go with the whole driving analogy of red, amber, and green, which of course is not great for people who are colorblind. So the red and the green looks the same. So we say something like this is probably good for a dashboard. So I'll show you a couple of examples of how we can build dashboards. So
Danielle, can I
yes,
just interrupt for 1
yes.
second? Do you have any tips for those of us accounting types who love to go into detail and struggle to pick out what's the important information and keeping it simple? Like, how do you do that when your nature is to jump into the detail? Do you have a way of thinking, the sort of ways you think through that?
That is so hard. That is so hard, because I think it is, and it's natural. We're detailed people. And I just want to. Somebody asks me a question, I just want to tell them everything. I've lived and breathed this financial model for weeks and weeks, or even months sometimes. And somebody asks me a question about it, and I say, but don't forget, you've got to consider this, and then there's the inflation, and then there's the effect of this, and then there's that, and they don't care. They asked you a simple question, and you just got to give them. And it's really, really hard, I think, to simplify things. And I think, I don't know what
Do you go out to the business a lot? Like, would you
yeah,
would
yeah.
interview the managers that are going to take the report and see what comes up for them as their key business issues that they're trying to address, what worries them or keeps them up at night?
Yeah. I guess those are the things that they need to know. And I guess that would come into how you build the financial model, isn't it? What key things or metrics need to be shown in the dashboard or in the report to ask them. I suppose communication. One of the things I do a lot of is just lots and lots of analysis, lots of pivot tables. When you're building a model or doing a piece of data analysis, to just build like dozens and dozens of pivot tables and loads of charts, and most of them you don't use. You don't. You just want to understand what's going on in the model or what's going on in the business, and just by creating all of that, you might go, oh, that one looks interesting, and you certainly wouldn't show them all of it because most of the time, charts are pretty boring and they kind of show what you expect. You want something that's interesting and going to tell them something about the business. Do you have any other tips, Jessica?
Um, yeah, I think that thing of slicing and dicing it different ways to see if interesting insights come out of it. Um, and then really thinking about what are the key fields that they would be interested in, because I think it's so easy to go, well, they need every field that was on this report. So, the one you're showing on screen could easily blow out into 15 fields because that's what you had on the original one, but you have to be so disciplined to go, well, if I had to cut it to real estate that looks a person can really absorb, what would that look like? And you just have to be brutal in cutting things out because normally what you end up going with is still more information than what other people can absorb because they haven't been through the detail. So I guess being harsher to cut things out than what you probably want to be.
That's true, yeah. And I think it also depends on your audience as well, because some audiences, it depends also, are they marketing people? They're not going to care about the numbers, maybe not. Or if they're finance people or other CPAs, then they probably want to see all of the details. So I think it really depends on who you're presenting to or who the report is created for.
Yeah.
Because Financial information is probably the thing that we see the most of in dashboards, and so it kind of makes sense to use the financial information and show it on the dashboard. But it's just so complex that a lot of people just don't understand. People have a bit of a mental block when it comes to Excel and finances or any kind of financial terms, because it's not intuitive. So I think it's when you're presenting financial information, it's important to simplify it, but not to dumb it down, if that makes sense. And that's hard. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things to do is to make it straightforward without sort of dumbifying it. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. So for example, if you were to present something, so let's say you're giving a presentation, on a screen like this, whether it's, Troy says, why do you say marketing guys don't care about numbers? No, I know a lot of them probably, maybe they do, but yeah, some might. Yeah. So so let's say, for example, you're giving a presentation, it's either on a screen like this or in person, on the screen, and you were to give the output of your financial model like this. And this is pretty boring, saying, this is your income statement, this is your income, operating income, taxes, net income. Can anybody tell me what was the net income that I had on there? I had it up there for quite a while, quite a long time. Can you remember, Jessica, what the net income was on the bottom of the screen? I had it up there for ages. We're not really wise. So if you can remember what it was it 25, 172 negative, or I have no idea. So just pop it in the chat if you can remember. Sometimes we get, if you've got a photographic memory, you might be able to just remember what was on there. But 3 times marketing expense, yeah. Okay. It's quite, we are not, well done, Dean. Yeah, good one.
Got a couple of different answers coming through.
Yeah.
It's
We're not wired to look at numbers, or to remember numbers. I mean, we're probably better at it than most people, but people don't retain numbers very easily. So some people got that right. Well done. So the net income number at the bottom was 25,245, but I certainly wouldn't present. Excel is not a presentation tool like this. You can make Excel look much nicer than that. So anything in showing the grid lines, I definitely would not do. And it would be perhaps a little better to perhaps show something like this, to say, to tell a story, to say, hey, this is my gross revenue, this is my inventory, direct costs, other sales, and then we take that away to give us the gross income, and that from that we need to pay staff cost, marketing, facilities, which leaves us with our operating income, and of course we then have to pay our taxes, which leaves 25,245 left over, which I think perhaps tells a story visually. And of course you still get the numbers, which is important. You do need to see the numbers. But if you're going to talk to someone about this income statement, I think perhaps showing it visually like that might just kind of, people retain it a little more. And that's very, very easy to do in Excel using a waterfall chart, of course. So just because we love numbers doesn't mean everybody loves numbers. So don't overwhelm people with numbers, because if they're overwhelmed or confused, they simply won't make decisions. And often that's what we want from our financial model, isn't it? You've got a model, you want to, a financial model is often built to make decisions. So you want to know, should we invest in this product, or should we open a new factory? And we want to make this decision, and the financial model or the business case would do that. Is you've built the financial model so that they can make a decision based on the numbers. And if you confuse them, they're simply not going to make decisions, which is what we want. So it's not very productive. So before we move on to the next section, I'll just check in to see if there were any questions or comments, Jessica.
I don't think we've got any others at the moment. I'm keeping an eye on it. No, I think we're right. We've just got answers to your question.
Great. I can't see those right now. That's okay. Great. Well, in that case, let's jump into a case study first of all. I might just share my Excel. Jessica might be familiar with this. This is a solution model from the Financial Modelling World Cup. Have you been competing in the Financial
No,
Modelling?
I haven't done it this year. I did it
You
last
haven't.
year, not this year. Yes. Have you been still going with it?
Yeah, oh, it's brutal. It's brutal. Every time I do it, I say, I'm not doing it anymore. It's so hard. So if you're interested in financial modeling, I'd highly recommend that you join in the Financial Modeling World Cup. It's not just for the elite. It's we have all sorts of modelers that compete. It goes about 8 times a year, and it's online. Takes 2 hours, and they're really, really hard questions. And they give models like this. So you were given a so I didn't build this model. This was the solution model. So you're basically given assumptions that perhaps look like that, and you have to build the model and ask questions and answer questions. It's multiple choice questions from it, and so you know it'll say this is a real estate model, so we need to calculate the return, and we look at the number of properties and the rent and the tenancies and the utilization or the rental amounts, and then the financial model would look something like that, and it looks at the construction here, and then from that we have our operations that looks like that, going forward. Let me make that a bit smaller so you can see. So you have all your supporting calculations, and then you have your cash flow, which looks like that. So there's a whole lot of, anybody looking at this model, unless you're a modeler or someone who built it, there's a lot of numbers and it's quite hard to come to grips with. So I took this model, which was built by the people from Financial Modelling World Cup, and just popped a dashboard over the top of it. So just some really simple charts just over the top like that. So I just went in and just created a couple of charts. I'll talk about in a minute about which charts perhaps you can create. So I just went into the model, just highlighted the dates, highlighted the costs, and then just created charts. So it's really nothing difficult. So just created a couple of charts that showed us rent revenue, number of units that have been leased, the loan balance, and then the construction costs. So I will make this model available afterwards. So if people want to have a look at that and kind of have a bit of a poke around and see perhaps what a dashboard might look like, and what a financial model, of course, from the Financial Model World Cup might look like. So things like this you would build into it. So you see how I've used, let me just make that a bit bigger. So this is a sort of thing you would want to build in your dashboard. So instead of it being hard coded, so a model should always be dynamic and able to change. So anything that that is as a number, of course, that might change. So I've just used inverted commas and then the ampersand to link the text and the numbers together. So I've just picked up the starting year and the ending year using the ampersand. And so that goes from 2021 to 2030, so it goes up 10 years. So if I were to go in and change the start date of the model, so if I go in and say, well, actually, we're going to push that out a couple of years and change that to 2023, that should just flow through the model. And you can see that the dates have updated, and importantly, the title of the dashboard has updated. So I'll just undo that one. So that's the sort of thing that you should think about when you build your dashboard over the top of your financial model. So pulling out pieces or important parts of your financial model and then show it visually on a single page, just as an example. Were there any questions about that one before I
don't think there's any on there. I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
Is there any way you draw the line about what you would make dynamic versus just static? And I'll give you an example of one where I think it has slowed down a file that I've looked at a fair bit, where it's using the name of the sheet like as a dynamic thing. So just in case, I guess, someone changed the name of the sheet, it would still work. But I
Yeah, that's a good
think it's
idea.
using up a fair bit of crunch time and making the file a lot slower. So how would you determine what's worth changing, well, making dynamic, should I say.
Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I've not experienced that where something being something dynamic would slow it down, but I can see that that would potentially happen. And I guess this is where the skill of the modeler comes in. You have to decide, how important is it for it to be dynamic versus the size. And there's a lot of things that you can do, of course, to try to reduce the size of the file. But yeah, if it's slowing it down, then you may determine that it's not worth it. I mean, basically, we try to make everything as dynamic as possible within reason. And I think it's more usually about the time that it takes to build. So like having to build that with the inverted commas and the ups, it's fiddly, but it's not that hard. But you wouldn't want to create, have every single cell like that because it just takes forever. I think
Yeah.
there might be something similar here. Yeah. So there we've used the text formula to sort of format it, and that'll link through, and that's worth it there. But in other places it may not be worth the time.
Yep. We've got a question from Peter. He said, what colors do you recommend using in models if some managers choose to print things out in black and white, i.e. to make it as visible as possible?
Yeah, yeah. I quite like this sort of monotone thing in Excel, the way that if you go into the chart design, and I think I've chosen the monochromatic only because it went with the logo that was already in there. And because that way, when you print it out in black and white, you're not really relying on the colors. So it's just kind of theme. I do quite like that. It can get a little bit leery if you. I'll show you one in Power BI in a minute that's quite bright, and I don't think it comes across so well in black and white. But you're absolutely right to consider how it's going to look in black and white. I think is important, and of course, as I said, staying away from the red, amber, green. Yeah. How can one link the Excel dashboard to PowerPoint? Is this practical? Yeah, you can. You can sort of you can either embed the model into PowerPoint. There are some links that you can do. Have you ever done this, Jessica? Linking the Excel and the PowerPoint together?
Yes, I have, yes.
It can, yeah, sometimes I've just found it a little bit flaky, but it might be better in recent versions. Generally, I tend to just try to keep everything in Excel and then just paste it into PowerPoint as a J as an image because that reduces the size of the file in PowerPoint. Also, the colors, you can control what the colors look like. But if you wanting to maintain it in PowerPoint, then you would perhaps embed it. But I would say try to keep it in one place, either in PowerPoint or in Excel one. I'd say probably try to keep it in Excel as long as you can. Hope that was helpful, Dean. So, when you're looking at the tool, so that was a case study, the options are Excel, to my mind anyway, Excel, or Excel. Those are the options when it comes to building a dashboard. So you need to think about your tools that you're going to use, and you can use pivot tables are great for dashboards, but pivot tables and financial models, we often don't use pivot tables in financial models simply because they're not dynamic. The point of a financial model is you change the inputs and the outputs change, and pivot tables don't do that. They're static, and you need to, they don't automatically update. But they are great for dashboards. You can think about using pivot tables. For financial models, I'd recommend just going with formulas. So just the dynamic formulas like I showed you there with where you've got things just dynamically changing. Or think about Power Excel being Power BI and Power Query. So I'll just talk sort of briefly. I think people are probably quite aware of where those sit, but I'll just kind of from the modeling perspective, generally we just sit in Excel. We just, for financial modeling, you can't go past just native Excel. But sometimes when you've got a large quantity of data, you can access the data model, which is kind of sitting behind Excel, using that functionality of Power Pivot and Power Query, they're kind of almost the same thing now. So they're on the data. If you're using the 365, they're sort of on the data tab. You've got Power Pivot and Power Query sort of all in one from Excel, and you would only use those if you've got large quantities of data, or you're wanting to manipulate, cleanse data in Power Query, or you could sort of go into Power BI, which of course is a completely different tool. So you're outside of Excel once you start looking at Power BI. So that's kind of the power family, I call it. But for financial modeling, I think we stick with Excel. What's your view on that, Jessica? Do you ever use Power BI for financial modeling?
No, I've seen a couple of presentations where people have, but I've kept to it in
Yeah.
mine and Power BI, though I don't have a lot of experience with it. Some teams that I've worked with have have started using it, but more for that dashboard view because you start to get in the formulas get very complicated and Excel just seems a lot simpler for building models. But I've seen a few people say the benefits of it, so. I guess
Yeah.
it just depends if you feel really comfortable with it and if it's on the simpler end. Like the more complicated it gets, the trickier it is to have in Power BI.
Yeah, yeah. But I think it depends on also how the data is. So if you're wanting to do scenario analysis and sort of, pure like what we think of as financial models where you've got, your P&L cash flow balance sheet, it is possible, but it's hard to do that in Power BI. So I'd probably just stick
Mm.
to Excel for that.
Sometimes with the results of what you get from a
Mm.
financial model, if you don't need it to be dynamic in doing those scenarios on the spot, it can be useful to help just make it more visually appealing and simpler. If the outputs are, there's lots of outputs, it can be useful that way, depending on what you need for your audience.
Mm.
We've got a question from Zoe, and she said, how would you choose between Power BI and Tableau?
Oh, well, it's yeah, Tableau is kind of the competitor to Power BI. It's sort of its equivalent, but it's not Microsoft. So I'm a Microsoft MVP, so I guess that's why I use Microsoft products. Tableau is great though. I've heard really good things about it. It's yeah, I think it used to be quite expensive compared to Power BI, but I think it's come down in price a little bit. Yeah, they're very similar in terms of the functionality of what they can do. It's just a different skill set and a different tool. Yeah. So I might jump over into Power BI, even though, as I say, we don't use Power BI so much for financial models, but I just wanted to sort of just show what Power BI can do because Power BI really is a dashboard tool. But this is not, this is just data, this is just a dump of expenditure information. So you can see this is my dashboard screen. This is my data. It just looks like that. I've only got one lot of data in there. You can have multiple tables of data and you can have sort of relationships between different data there. And that's your sort of output. But the beauty of using Power BI is that you can, filter and slice. But you can do that in using a slicer in a pivot table, of course. But the great thing about it is that you can have this functionality. You could publish it into your workspace in Power BI and distribute it to your users that way, and they can use it. But for financial models, it's probably not as useful. So we won't. I'll kind of leave it there as far as that goes.
Adam had a question, when would you
Yeah,
use Power BI? So you've
yeah.
probably gone into that, if it's where you're more working with data rather than needing a dynamic financial model where you can change assumptions and run scenarios and things.
Yeah. So that one that I showed you from the example from the Financial Modelling World Cup, that's probably more what you would think of as a financial model with a dashboard over the top of it. So I'll make that one available. So lastly, I just wanted to jump into some principles of dashboard design. So because I feel like it's often a thing that is it's a skill that doesn't necessarily come naturally. I think it's something to do with the analytical or logical brain. We are not naturally very good at the visuals, and I really had to work hard at this when I first started it because I have no idea about what colors go with what, and I really had to sort of learn it. So I'm interested to see what people think about this. What Jessica, maybe you can, or perhaps people can pop in the chat what they think. So if you had say 4 different departments, say this is the output of your financial model, and you needed to compare 4 different departments, which chart do you think would work best? Which one would you go for, Jessica, or if anyone could
Um,
pop it in the chat with it?
Probably a column chart, unless you didn't care about you could use a pie chart if you more would really wanting to get an idea of what
Yeah,
component of the total, but just to compare them, a column chart.
yeah, yeah.
Happy to see
So
whatever anyone else wants to type in. Happy for any
yeah, a
suggestions.
bar or a column. Yeah, yeah, bar or column. Yeah, yeah. Let's have a look at what it looks like as a line. Yeah, it doesn't really make sense, does it? I
No,
mean,
it looks like you're moving over time when you're
yeah,
not.
exactly. Exactly. So yeah, anything that's you sort of reserve the line chart for time series, and most financial models are time series, but this one is not. This is about comparison. So I guess it depends on what your message is. So our message here is comparison. So a line chart doesn't work. Neither does this one. It's pretty
More
horrible, isn't it?
complicated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, is that what you meant? The the
Mm,
the column? Yeah.
yeah.
That's really good for comparison. And if you put the numbers over the top in Excel, it satisfies us. Oh, it's also one of the points of best practice in data visualization is to reduce clutter and to reduce your data increase ratio. So if I were to put the numbers across the top, you probably don't need the y-axis label. So you try to make things clear so that your meaning can just leap out of the page. And that's similarly the bar. And you can also do the same thing there. Again, you probably don't need those x-axis labels either. What do you think about that one?
Ooh, very pointy.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite hard to compare, isn't it?
And it's quite distracting because you just like think of a hat or something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you were Mako and you wanted to like make things not look as bad as what they really are, and you don't want people to understand what the numbers are saying, that's the chart you would use. So
We
anything
would
that's
never do that.
the 3D is skewed.
Mm,
So yeah, don't do that one. And the bar, the pie, yeah. In this case, I don't like the pie. There's certain,
it's not that clear, is it?
yeah. I mean, if you're doing like male versus female or something like that,
Mm,
where there's only a couple of options, then the pie perhaps might be okay. But in this case, it makes it. If my purpose here is to compare, this is not great. Even putting a hole in the middle of it
yeah.
doesn't make it any better. Making it yeah, like that, or exploding it, it's just not getting any better. What about this one? About your
Ow.
meaning should just leap off the page.
Mm,
Yeah. So this is coming from that example, the real estate. If you're looking at the number of units versus the occupancy. Is that clear? Does that make
right.
sense to you? So
Right.
yeah, having the label, so you can see the units are in the middle and the occupancy is on the outside.
Mm,
So you're wanting to sort of show the correlation between the number of units of lease, whereas a percentage of occupancy as a total. So yeah, it's quite hard to follow, isn't it?
yeah.
It's really
Yeah,
not
you don't know what to look at first.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So I guess think about what charts get your message across the best, and that's probably not the best one to use. So, thinking about, whether we would use a table or whether we should use a chart in a dashboard. Often we do use tables from financial models because then it's very much about the numbers. But you would use it for reference or precision, or you don't need to see it visually. But, and this is important, that the table shouldn't be used in a live presentation. So, if I'm telling people numbers, actually giving them numbers is not really it's not useful. They're not going to remember it. If you would give that to them as in an email or in a presentation so they can refer to it later, it's going to be, having something like this is the numbers don't really mean anything. It's much better if you were to display it like that. Similarly, information should cause what is meaningful to stand out. So what I want to know here is how many fives are there? Can anybody tell me how many fives? Can you count them? I can see your eyes trying to count them. It's
Trying to go.
13. Okay, wow. Would it be easier if I did that?
Yeah, I was going to say 3.
Yeah, yeah. It's much easier. So think about your message. So what is it that you're trying to? So often the financial model was built for a purpose. So it's built to give across a certain message, and so you want to make that meaningful. And you can use color to do that, or you can use a chart to do that. And here's an interesting one: the glass ceiling. So this was, showing a good news story. So we can see here how much the percentage of women CEOs in Fortune 500 companies has increased, which is a good news story, versus if you were to show the 50% and then show how that compares as a total. So it really, you have so much power. As a modeler, I mean, of course, you have a lot of power, but with presenting the results of your financial model, you can choose to tell a good news story, or you can choose to say, hey, we've got a long way to go. So that's, I just wanted to point out a couple of things that you can do to sort of put across a message in a certain way. So, are there any? We're all good. Okay.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
lastly, yeah, just to find the story. And I think this is what you were saying earlier, Jessica. It can be really hard to get a bird's eye view of the financial model when the numbers, there's just so much intricacy within the model, and then kind of showing, picking out what's important and communicating that to people. So using your analysis from your financial model to find the story in the numbers, and then to use that dashboard to then tell the story to others. Because of course, I truly think this is one of the best things that you can do for your career, because you have, if you have good financial modeling skills, good analysis, good analytical skills, nobody is going to know unless you can communicate the results of your financial model. So you can build a fantastic financial model, but if you haven't been able to communicate the story in the numbers, then you're really not going to get the recognition that you deserve. So that was pretty much it for what I have for you. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the events and things that are happening. But first of all, I thought we'd see if there were any other questions. Did we miss any questions, Jessica, or?
I can't see any at the moment. Just while we're waiting for that, I'll
Yeah,
ask one about
yeah,
so
sure. Jump.
presenting your dashboard. So you've working through it and trying to make sure you pick the right graphs and think about how the real estate is set out, and that you're getting a clear message across. Do you have any tips for actually presenting, where it's not, you're not just sending via email or another method out to people, you actually have to get up and present it? How do you suggest people deal with what's in the presentation versus what they're actually talking about, and that they're not just reading straight off exactly what is there? Any tips?
Do you mean by whether you would show Excel or whether you would show PowerPoint, or?
Or more if you have developed an Excel, so you've got your graph, sorry, you have developed the PowerPoint presentation, and so you've got your graphs on, then you've done a good job of like showing it clearly, but how can you go about, what are tips when you're actually up there presenting it around being clear about information, so that you have a powerful message and it's not lost by just sort of going, oh, as you can see on the screen, and then you don't really say anything else, and you
Yeah,
just
that's a good
expect
point.
people to get all the meaning out of it.
Yeah. I think you've got to tell them. I think you've got to sort of do like, give them the punchline first, like an executive summary, like a board paper, give them an executive summary first. Like, what are the output of the model? Tell them what is it that the model's telling us. This is the results, and this is why. That's how I think you should, generally, how you should structure the presentation. Because what a lot of people do is, we did this, and then we did this, and then we did that, and then we calculated, the percentage increase growth, and like, I don't care.
Yeah, they don't care. Yeah.
Or if I were to present the model like this, and I were to say, well, okay, so here's a cash flow, and and this is calculated based on that, and then we used the assumptions, and then we used an EO month formula to calculate, like, they don't care, and people kind of get completely lost when you start, jumping around, numbers and all that. So definitely use PowerPoint to give, the just key points. So whether it's, key assumptions, so inputs, perhaps scenarios, and then the key sort of outputs,
Yeah. And a lot of that is in planning, I think, that up front you want to be really clear with the business. What is the issue that they're trying to solve, and what's their interest in it, so that when you get to the end and you're presenting your model and you've put it into PowerPoint, you know what's going to interest them, and you can you can repeat their business problem back to them and check in with them again, like along the way and in the presentation, to say, confirming, this is what we've been tasked to look at, or this is the issue that we've got in the business, and these are the results. And you're really sticking to making sure that your presentation is focusing on what their issue is and really putting yourself in their shoes. I've seen a lot, as analytical people, it's so easy to go, and then I found this new formula and it was so great because it helped me do, and it almost gets into that showing how skilled you are
whatever you are,
models,
showing off your long formulas that are like,
yes. Rather than, and it can be just because you're trying to show them that you've done a lot of work on it and that you've really thought through, and been careful about the model, but to them it comes across as, oh geez, they're just dragging on with all of their detail. I just want to get to the punchline. So it does drift off often because that's our style, is to integrate into the detail. Now I see we are getting a few questions. Can you see those, Danielle, or would you like me to read them out to you?
No, I can see there's a question from Francis just about the example. So the model, that Excel model, I'll make that available for everyone.
Okay.
Let me see if
We have a question from Mel asking, are there any dashboard building websites you would recommend to help us upskill?
Oh, so many, so many. I really like, I've got one of the books behind me, is Storytelling with Data. It's one of my favorites. Yeah, there's some fantastic resources there. So many. Chandu does a lot of dashboarding stuff. Yeah, and Stephen Few, who I mentioned there. So there's quite a few resources. Yeah.
There's a Brisbane-based financial modelling duo, I think, that have a podcast, and the name of it's going to escape me now. But yeah, this great storyteller with data, that's her main focus, gave a presentation to, I think it was the CPA young CPA network last year, and I'm going to forget her name, but I think if you Googled, financial modelling podcast Brisbane, because that's quite relevant to those of us in Queensland or around Australia, that the type of data they're talking about is going to be relevant to you. There's a podcast, and I think they have quite a good website as well. So that's something you could search for if you want something fairly local.
It sounds like a good, might be a good speaker coming up for
yeah, she was great because she really got behind, well, what are we trying to show the audience, and always keeping that in mind. Another question we've got is, sorry, you might have seen Francis's message. Can we access the example of the data modelling? You've already said that one.
I can see now, I can see Adam said that people learn in different ways, visual, audio, tactile. Yeah. How do you make the presentation talk to people? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people do learn in different ways, but I do know that people will respond better to visuals than numbers. Yeah, I think by sort of doing a bit of both, doing the audio and it will help people to retain the information. That's what you really, really want people to sort of understand, what it is that you're trying to get across to them easily. Peter says, do you think it's a good idea to include a summary tab? Absolutely, and where they came from. I would say a summary is different to the inputs assumptions. So certainly inputs and assumptions are very detailed. You'd have absolutely, like any good financial modeler would put in exactly where the source of where it came from and all the detail. not so much for them, but for other people that are using the model in the future, or perhaps for them coming back to it. Certainly, you probably wouldn't present that. Most of the time, it's too much information to show, and then you would perhaps summarize that on a summary page, which could be the same thing as a dashboard, or it could just be often, a summary and a dashboard is the same thing. Yeah.
Sometimes you can put put in an appendix to the presentation, so you can refer people to say, at the end of this presentation, which we'll be sending out, it has a copy of the assumptions and they can look at it later. And then you've always got it there if senior management that you're presenting it to, because sometimes they are really interested in what the key assumptions are. So then you can flip to it if you want to, but you're not looking like you're bombarding them with detail if they're not interested.
Exactly.
And I think, I'm just going to check, I think we have someone who's very helpful, like Marco, who has mentioned Kate Norris, who I'm guessing is the person from Brisbane who does the financial modelling podcast. So thank you very much, Marco, for that.
Great. Would you offer a summary of assumptions? Yes. If you don't always have to communicate because often the assumptions are like really, really like so minute and not so important. But they do need to be documented, but I wouldn't summarize them unless they're important. So these are important assumptions, and by important assumptions, these are things that are material to the model, or things that if you're going to accept the output of the financial model, you need to accept the assumptions that go into it. So you do need to make those assumptions clear, but only the ones that are material, the ones that they really, really need to know. I think we are good.
Might be through everything. Yeah, thank you, everybody.
I just wanted to mention the Women in Financial Modelling group, because particularly for the Financial Modelling World Cup, we don't have very many women at the top there, so always encouraging more women to get into financial modelling. So I run that meetup group, so we get together and train and talk about the Financial Modelling World Cup. So the next one's coming on the 16th of June. We've also got an open meetup for everybody, which is coming up on the 8th of June. And then I'm going to Saudi Arabia in July, but I'm speaking at the online meetup on the 10th of June. So everybody is welcome to attend that one as well. So those are all on that site there. So yeah. That was pretty much it from me, Jessica.
Wonderful. Thank you, Danielle. I've just had a very quick look at Kate's website. It's called Presentation Boss, if anyone's interested in.
I think I have heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, she was a great speaker last year. Danielle, thank you so much. I think we have gotten to the end of the questions. So Danielle has confirmed that, are you going to send out, or are you comfortable if we send out a copy of the presentation?
Of course.
Yeah, and the copy of the modelling that Frances had asked for, that will be sent out after the session. So thank you very much, Danielle. That was wonderfully engaging as always, and I know that our viewers tonight will be, all the more wiser for dashboards, and also just what to think through, and the importance of getting a clear message across, sort of from a financial modelling perspective, but also that wider view with data as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, and I'm sure I will not be a stranger, because I'll be here for the next one, whether either in person.
Oh yes, I think we've already booked it in. It's 27th of July, correct? I hope I'm saying the right date there. I think it is 27th of July. We probably should have written that down beforehand, but I'm pretty sure it's the 27th of July. We don't have it up on the website yet, but it will come out within the next month. So keep an eye out for it on the website and through the fortnightly newsletter. In the next 48 hours, you will receive an evaluation survey. So please, if you can, fill that out. It really helps us understand what's useful for our members, and also any suggestions you have about future topics. We would love to hear that as well, because we run this 4 times a year, and we've got time for the rest of the year to find speakers on topics that are of interest to the majority of those who are attending the group. And also a recording of the session will be made available in our fortnightly newsletter. So thanks again for everyone attending. Thank you to Trupti, our wonderful host from CPA, who always stays back late to help us out, and is the guru behind our presentations actually working. So thank you, Trupti, and good night, everybody. We'll see you at the next session.
Thanks, Jessica. See you soon.
See you.
Bye.
Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Danielle.
Good night.
Good night.